Today we're going to talk about what you should do if your ball python escapes. We're going to get into the number one thing you should do a little bit later on how to prevent this from happening at all. Because maybe you clicked on this video because you have already lost your animal. So with that in mind, let's get into what you should do right away. The very first thing you should do, and it's going to sound cliche, is don't panic. It is going to cause you to rush, so therefore you might overlook the animal. It's going to cause you to make rash decisions, and it's going to possibly even cause you to hurt your animal in haste of trying to move something. That's a very quick point, but it is a very, very important point. Take a second, take a deep breath, and focus. One of the very first places you're going to want to check when you think you have an escaped animal is the enclosure itself. Maybe you put a new decoration in there and you didn't realize maybe it's hollow on the inside. So take care when you're putting new things in there that they don't have hollow insides that they can squish themselves into and possibly even harm themselves, because if they can get their head in it, they're going to try. If you have deep substrate, dig it up because they can burrow. The next thing you should do is check your immediate surroundings, especially if it hasn't been more than a day. Snakes seem to think they want to explore until they get out into a big wide open space that they're not familiar with, and then they get scared. I wish I could tell you that I've never had a snake escape, but that is not the truth. The one that we just recently ironically had happened when we went to Tinley. We found it right next to its enclosure. It had gotten down, and I kid you not, gotten into one of my backup hides. So you should look into its immediate surroundings. It's not going to immediately seek out a heat source, as some people might say. If it's been a while, sure, but check the immediate room. You should probably lock up any cats or dogs you have, because their initial reaction might be to play with or hurt these animals, and then you should shut the doors of that room, and you should thoroughly and carefully check the room. So if you need to move a bed, don't just start dragging it out of haste. You could smash, squish, tear, and that is no good. You do want to move at a good pace, but if you rush, you're either going to overlook something or you are going to harm your animal. So check nearby beds if it's in a bedroom, check behind incubators because it is a close spot that is somewhat warm, or honestly, if you have a rack system, check behind the tubs. You should just start pulling with the one that they were in and then move your way up and down from there. You will often find them in there because, for one, it's warm back there. It's got the heating source most likely, right? Plus, it's incredibly dark. Check along the walls because even when they move around, they prefer to be somewhat stealthy. They're not going to want to be out in the open. Check anything in the immediate area that might produce warmth. And again, take your time and be careful. Look around in the upper parts of the room too, especially if there was opportunities for them to climb up. Do you have any closets in that particular room? Closets are traditionally dark. They might be a little bit messy. They are going to go in that closet, wedge themselves under a bunch of garbage. If you haven't found your animal yet, I would still recommend possibly thinking about keeping your search within that room. And remember, they really only need heat to digest food. So they're going to seek out heat at some point, but they are probably going to seek safety before they seek heat. So look into things that you normally wouldn't look at. They can, again, wedge themselves into crazy spots. So if maybe your enclosure underneath of it has a bit of a gap, look in there. We were at a snake show once where an animal had gotten out overnight, and we actually found one of them inside of a manual handheld forklift. It was up into the arms of this thing, like around the wheel. Think about if someone had been hastily just dragging this thing out of the way, what would have happened? So use that as you will. They will put themselves in the weirdest, hardest to find spots. So look in areas that you might not normally think of. If you have a gap in that area, there's a good chance your animal might be there. Another thing that might go without saying, if you have other people that maybe live in your home and are comfortable in helping, well, using a fresh set of eyes is always helpful. So have someone helping you with that sort of thing and helping you move things. Obviously, heavy things, just dragging them across the floor is not ideal. Think about how you move it and how it could potentially hurt your animal if not done properly. Now, if you've exhausted all of these options in the room itself and you are ready to move out of the room, you will hear a lot of times people say, look behind your refrigerator and look behind your stove, look behind really any appliance, because these appliances generate heat. So looking behind the refrigerator, under the refrigerator, or sometimes the backs of fridge have some gaps back there, looking within those areas is helpful because they are going to eventually seek it out, and refrigerators are always generating heat back there. Same thing with the stove, with your dryer, with any really major appliance, anything that generates heat, especially if it has an area where they can hide. If you have a hot water heater, look in that area. Furnaces, these are usually going to be good areas where you might be able to find something, though you might need to kind of get a little creative of getting back there. It's not like many of these things can be picked up and moved. So maybe this is the one area where I advocate putting your phone on a selfie stick and kind of pushing it back behind so you can look behind there to see if you need to take other steps to get back there to remove the animal. And believe it or not, one other area to check would be around the toilet. I have actually heard several people tell me, and I've seen it on the internet as well, finding their animal in the toilet bowl or in even the basin of the toilet somehow. But just check in any dark area that you might not think of is basically what we're getting at here. And again, I can't reiterate this enough. Be careful when you move things. Take your time and be thorough. You could very easily pull something up, look around, go like this, and then put it down, not realizing that when you pulled it up, it was within whatever you pulled up. But because you didn't take the extra few seconds to do a thorough scan of the area, you will overlook it. And then that's even worse because now you think that you had that area covered. If you hit pause on this video and it's now been 3 hours and you still can't find your animal, at this point you want to set up what I like to call a capture box. You're going to set up an enclosure basically on the ground with a warm spot turned on. And you'll also want to put this in a pretty opportune space. Remember, if you set this in the middle of the room, they're very unlikely to come to it. You want to set it in a dark area. You want to set it maybe in that closet. You want to set it against the wall, somewhere that they will feel safe moving to. You might want to set up a few of these boxes in several rooms. Obviously, the immediate room, again, remains the number one area I recommend. So maybe 1 or 2 of these in that room if you have the ability for a few of these. You also want to set them up in a few other rooms. But if you can only choose one room, choose the immediate room that they were in. Maybe you can move it from night to night if you still haven't found them after a bit. You can also bait the capture box. Put a frozen thawed rodent of your animal's preferred choice, thaw it out like you normally would to feed them, but then leave it in a paper bag within that capture box. Again, keep it in a dark space. If you have that warm spot on it and it's already in a dark place, they are going to say, well, I want to stay here. It's warm, it's dark, it's safe. Especially if they end up eating your bait, they're very likely going to just stay over top of that heat source. And again, safely as well, you're going to need to thermoregulate that hot spot. You're going to want to do it with a heat mat, even if you like using lights. In this case, the light is going to tell them it's daytime. It's going to make them want to stay away possibly. So use a heat mat with a regulated thermostat so that you don't cause damage to your home. And then you'll just kind of want to look around every other night too in other spots, maybe moving this capture box to other areas to hopefully entice them to come into your convenient, nice, beautiful area still in a dark spot so that they can feel safe and you can find them. So now that we've talked about looking for the animal, let's talk about how to prevent it going forward. And that prevention could look different depending on how you keep your animal. If you keep your animal in a rack system, it's very unlikely that they escaped for any other reason than you forgetting to push it all the way back in. Now, I think it's theoretically possible for a really large animal to push itself out, but it's highly unlikely. And if they are an incredibly large snake, you're going to find them a lot easier. But in a rack system, there is still something that you can do. The one escape that we had for snake did come from that. And why did it happen? Because we were in a hurry to get to Tinley. So take time. Don't do anything in a hurry. It's just going to result in subpar results. You can also get these little pins for certain racks, and maybe others can be modified to also have these. However, again, I find it highly unlikely, especially that a ball python would ever be able to push itself out. The next most common escape would be the latching or locking lids, because quite frankly, either the lock failed or it was left open on accident. So there's several different ways this can happen. Obviously, if you're in a hurry, again, you just leave it open and you're gonna get out. The next way would be forgetting to lock it. One of the other animals we had and found almost immediately was a bearded dragon. I had closed it and somehow neglected to lock it. She pushed her way out and immediately made her way over to the window so she could bask. So make sure that you are properly locking it. You can lock it and the lock will appear in place, but you can still easily open it. So maybe try it. Just make sure that that lock is secure, because if you lock something but it's open, it's not locked. And finally, another way that these locking cases can result in an escaped animal would be if the lock fails. I actually had this happen for my other one that got out. This is for a crested gecko. I searched inside, I looked around, but then I noticed when I tried to close and lock it that it just fell right back down. So it had broken, and the gecko managed to figure that out and pushed their way out and got out. That one took a little bit longer, but we did find it, ironically, right underneath the dresser that it was on, hiding in the back corner. Another thing that they might escape from would be glass enclosures. Screens are not infallible. They can lose cohesion, especially if you have something like a ceramic ceramic heater on them. They can and will exploit that weak point and possibly smash their way through, popping the screen lid off in this just one spot. And yes, it will do a significant amount of damage to their scales, maybe their eyes, all parts of them as they squeeze the rest of their fat body through this hole. So if you think that you have a screen top that's secure, maybe you want to double check that. There's screen tops for these things that people make that are far more secure. Another main way is because they don't secure the screen top. I know it sounds crazy, but a lot of people think, hey, I'm going to put some books or some heavy bricks on this and this will take care of it. No, it won't. As it starts to get bigger, stronger, it is going to use its leverage and its incredible strength. Remember, this thing is a constrictor. They are pure muscle. They will use their bodies, push themselves against the ground, and use that incredible muscle to push that off. And once they get the gap, it doesn't matter how hard that brick is pushing down. Once they get their nose through that gap, it's over. And if anything, now the bricks are causing massive harm to your animal. So do not secure your enclosure with bricks, please. I recommend highly using a completely different top. If you're not going to do those, at least secure your lid with clips. You can buy these, make sure they're not bad, make sure they are properly working, test them out, try to lift it yourself. And I would recommend in all four sides. And then finally, tubs without a rack. Some people will keep animals on a budget, and you can keep them in tubs, kind of like you do in a rack system, but just ones that you buy, say, from Walmart and such like that have locking lids. These actually work great for a starter enclosure for your animal. They're not as great to look into, clearly, but if you are on a budget, this is a great thing that provides them everything they need. With that said, they're easily going to push something with only 2 locks on it. If it's a much smaller animal, then you can get away with a little bit less, but again, like what I said, eventually they're gonna grow. They sell ones that lock in 6 or 8 different places. So make sure that if you're using this tub system, that you're using it for an appropriately sized animal and that it is appropriately locking. The bigger the animal, more locks. At the very least, you're gonna want 4. 1 for each side. Same as the clips, really. But the ones with 6 at the very least that have 2 locks on the longer sides, those are very ideal because they're gonna hold it in place a lot better. Now that hopefully you found your animal, I want to show you the thought process of an animal escaping would be. So we're going to simulate one of our animals being left open. Of course, if anything happens, we're going to step in and reshoot if we think it's going to harm itself, but we're going to let it get away and see where it goes. So we're actually going to show 2 of them for you. This one here is in a completely separate room from our normal snakes, and he's a little more timid, as you can see. It actually took quite some time for us to get any sort of activity at all out of him. And then you can see he starts looking off to his left. And right about here, he starts to actually go behind the enclosure. So you can see right there, he's interested, but he didn't want to leave the safety of the enclosure where he has heat and everything like that. These are bare bones enclosures that we keep. These haven't been used in quite some time. We just kind of moved him into there, but he still wanted to stay in this enclosure, which he is kept an enclosure just like this, by the way, just with some more stuff in there. So he's somewhat familiar with his box, but he didn't want to come out. And you can see he was very curious, but the second he looked out, he wants to go right back in. So when he finally decided to go out, where did he go? He went directly to his left and then curved himself around the back and tried to get behind everything. So I can show you right there what I was talking about. They want to stay to the sides of things, usually keeping themselves pushed up against something so that they're not exposed in any way. Even though he's very used to people, safety is his #1 concern. This guy, however, is very confident. I didn't even get out of the frame before he started doing the exact same thing, going right behind his enclosure. He's a very unique personality, and I knew he would come out right away, but he immediately shoots his head out and just says, oh, bye, and goes off to the left. Same exact motion, mind you. Took the path of least resistance to immediately be hidden. So keep that in mind if you're trying to keep your headspace in that of an escaped snake. I hope that this was able to help you. If you lost your snake, and if you did not lose your snake, I hope that this prepares you for what many people say is inevitable. If you enjoyed this video, you can actually check out many of our ball python care videos right here or here.